Hey, has your spaceship been taken over by a hostile force? Have you tried getting drunk and or making out with one of them? Just a suggestion. This is a review of the Star Trek The Original Series episode By Any Other Name. If you have not seen this episode and you don't want to know why you should always be extra careful with styrofoam packing materials, be warned. Spoilers beyond this point. Once again, we find the crew of the Enterprise in trouble because they responded to a distress call that turned out to be from bad guys waiting to trick them. See, this is why, if I were the captain of a spaceship, I would never answer distress calls. I know, regulations. Well, you know what? I bet there's also regulations saying you should try to keep aliens from stealing your spaceship. So I'm going with those. And anybody putting out a distress call when I'm the closest ship around is just gonna have to wait for the next one. And don't be mad at me. Be mad at the bad guys who keep sending out phony distress calls. They're the ones who are ruining it for everybody. What are we talking about? Kirk, Spock, McCoy, and a couple of red shirts beam down to a planet in response to a distress call, and guess what? There's nobody in trouble. It's just this guy, Rojan, who walks up like, "Ha! Gotcha! It's the old phony distress call gag. Me and my people are stealing your ship." Kirk's like, that doesn't work for me. But then Rojan and his companion, Kalinda, push buttons on their belts, and suddenly Kirk and the others are unable to move. These aliens have freeze tag belts. Rojan says, "We can freeze you whenever we want, so you might as well do as we say. We're taking your ship to the Andromeda Galaxy, so we can tell the others in the Kelvin Empire, where we come from, that this galaxy is habitable to us and available to be conquered. Sound good? Doesn't matter, we're doing it." While Rojan explains the situation to Kirk, we cut to the Enterprise, where a small team of Rojan's people use their freeze tag belts to incapacitate the crew and assume control of the ship. Back on the planet, Kirk asks Rojan why they want the Enterprise when the Andromeda Galaxy is so far away, even at maximum speed, the trip would take thousands of years. Rojan's like, "Psh, maybe the way you drive. We're going to modify your ship's engines so that the trip will only take about 300 years. Rojan also fills Kirk in on a little bit of his group's backstory. It seems that due to rising radiation levels, the Andromeda Galaxy will be uninhabitable to his people within another 10,000 years or so. That being the case, the Kelvin Empire dispatched expeditions to locate another galaxy. Rojan's ship managed to make it through the energy barrier at the edge of the Milky Way, but it was heavily damaged, which is why they need the Enterprise. Now that they've confirmed the Milky Way is habitable, they're heading back home to tell the rest of their people to begin the invasion. Kirk's like, "You don't have to invade. There are plenty of available planets. You could just peacefully settle and live in harmony with the people already here." But Rojan says, "Nah, not really our style. We're more into conquering." Rojan imprisons Kirk, Spock, McCoy, and the red shirts in a cave. McCoy and Spock discuss the tricorder readings they took of Rojan and Kalinda and reason that though they appear to be human, their bodies are a little too perfect, suggesting that they aren't actually human, but merely assuming human form. Kirk decides their best bet is to get their hands on one of those freeze tag belts and then try to track down the central energy source. If they can do that, maybe they can jam the signal. Kirk's like, "Jam, that's what I'm hungry for. Some jam on a nice piece of toast. God, I wish I'd eaten something before we beamed down here." Kalinda is on guard duty outside the cave, leaning against the rock wall, so Spock mind melds with her through the rock wall. Something throws Spock across the room, and Kalinda comes in to see what's going on, and Kirk knocks her unconscious with a karate chop to the neck. You know how you can karate chop someone on the neck one time and they'll instantly be knocked out? That's what he does, and snags her freeze tag belt. The landing party runs out of the cave, but they run right into Rojan and one of his other Kelvins, this Kevin McDonald-looking guy named Haynar. Kalinda wakes up and gets her freeze tag belt back from Kirk, and Rojan says, "You tried to escape, I'm gonna have to punish you for this." And Haynar turns the dial on his freeze tag belt and pushes the button, and the two red shirts are instantly reduced to blocks of styrofoam. Rojan picks up the styrofoam and explains to Kirk that they have been distilled down to the essence of what they were. Then he crushes one of the styrofoam blocks in his hand and says, "That's a dead one." Hanar restores the other block back to human form, and Kirk kneels down over the dust of the crushed block like, "You killed the cute girl? You bastard!" So now they're back in the cell, and after his interrupted Rockwall mind meld, Spock is convinced that the Kelvins are actually far more exotic-looking creatures, gigantic beings with hundreds of tentacles who have assumed human form in order to operate the Enterprise. Kirk has another escape plan. Spock will fake being sick so that he and McCoy can return to the ship, and once there, hopefully they can reconfigure some of McCoy's medical equipment to block the signal from the central power source for the freeze tag belts. Spock goes into a Vulcan death trance or whatever, Hanar falls for it and lets them back on the ship, and once in sickbay, McCoy manages to convince Tomar, the Kelvin guard, to leave them alone. When the modifications to the engines are ready, everyone else beams up to the Enterprise too, and Rojan orders a course set for the Andromeda Galaxy. Rojan tells Chekhov to increase speed to warp 11. Chekhov's like, "These go to 11?" Meanwhile, the plan to jam the freeze tag belt signal hits a snag. Spock and Scotty locate the power source, which the Kelvins have placed in engineering, but the power source is shielded by impenetrable material. Not to worry, though, because Scotty has a workaround. When the Enterprise makes contact with the galactic barrier, which as we all know is composed of negative energy, he can release positive energy, triggering a massive explosion and killing everybody, including the Kelvins. They share this plan with Kirk, who is less than enthused. When the time comes, Kirk decides not to order Scotty to blow everyone up, and the Enterprise passes through the barrier and into intergalactic space, straight for the Andromeda Galaxy. Once they're through the barrier and it looks like smooth sailing to Andromeda for the next few hundred years, Rojan says, "Okay, we're not going to need most of these humans now, so go ahead and turn all of them into styrofoam blocks, except Kirk, Spock, McCoy, and Scotty." And then that happens. Later, Kirk, Spock, McCoy, and Scotty are sharing a meal in the mess hall. Kirk's staring down at his plate of food cubes like, "Why did I order this? I didn't want this. I wanted toast and jam. Fuck, can this day get any worse?" Tomar walks in and makes fun of them for eating food instead of just taking their necessary nutrients in pill form. McCoy says, "Hey, don't knock it till you've tried it." So Tomar fixes himself a plate of food cubes and starts eating, and he likes it. He really likes it. He likes it so much, it gives Spock an idea. From his earlier mind meld, plus additional observations of their behavior, Spock reasons that the Kelvins have incredibly disciplined minds, but in their natural forms, they don't experience physical sensation or emotion. They are experiencing all of these things now for the first time in their recently assumed human forms. Perhaps this is a weakness that can be exploited to distract the Kelvins so the crew can take back the ship. Kirk sends the others out with orders to stimulate the senses of the Kelvins. Scotty's like, "Dibs on Tomar," and invites the guy over to his place for an after-dinner drink. McCoy calls Hanar to sickbay for a series of injections. McCoy says they're just vitamin shots, but he's actually giving Hanar a chemical that will make him irritable. Kirk starts flirting and smooching on Kalinda, and Spock plays mind games with Rojan, hoping to inflame Rojan's jealousy over Kalinda getting closer to Kirk. And all of this works perfectly, just like our heroes hoped it would. Hanar gets tired of taking shit from Rojan and picks a fight with him on the bridge. Then Rojan gets into a much bigger fight with Kirk over Kalinda. I think Rojan likes her. And though it apparently takes every drop of booze he's got, including a bottle of green stuff and a dust-covered fifth of scotch, which he was saving for, I don't know, the death of his wife or something, Scotty drinks Tomar under the table. Spock and McCoy walk in during Kirk's brawl with Rojan. Kirk tells Rojan that if the Kelvins aboard the Enterprise have been this affected by living in human form already, just imagine what their descendants will be like when they finally reach the Andromeda Galaxy 300 years from now. They'll no longer be Kelvins at all. They'll be humans, aliens, enemies of the Kelvins. Kirk offers Rojan an alternative. Come to the Milky Way as friends, not as conquerors, and begin a new destiny for the Kelvin people in peace. They can go to the government of the Federation, figure out a plan, and then send a robot ship to the Andromeda Galaxy to share the proposal with the Kelvins. Rojan says, "But if we decided to stay in your galaxy instead of going home, where would we live?" McCoy's like, "Just go back to that planet where we found you. It seemed nice, and nobody else was there." Rojan turns to Kalinda and says, "And what about you? I guess you'd want to stay with your new boyfriend, Captain Kirk?" Kalinda says, "No, actually, I want to stay with you." And she kisses him. And Kirk's over there like, "Thank God, I was not looking for anything long-term there." Rojan orders his people to stand down and hands command of the Enterprise back to Kirk. Kirk orders them to turn around and head back for the Milky Way. And that's it! The end! There are 79 episodes of classic Star Trek, 80 if you count the first pilot, which was never aired during the original broadcast run. And out of all of those episodes, this is definitely one. As most of you know who are fans of the show, there are some original series episodes that are absolute all-timers. Your Balance of Terrors, your City on the Edge of Forevers, your Trouble with Tribbleses. And there are debacles so bad they have to be seen to be believed. Your Spock's Brains, your Turnabout Intruders. But most episodes fall in the middle of those two extremes and are just kinda By Any Other Name is such an episode. It's not like it's great or anything, but it's not terrible either. It has a few memorable moments, some funny scenes, some images that, for one reason or another, have stuck and become iconic elements of the tapestry of Star Trek, but overall, it's fairly forgettable. One reason why it fails to leave much of an impression, I think, is that the supposed stakes of the story never really come across on screen. Rojan and his people are scouts for a powerful alien empire from another galaxy that is going to invade and conquer our galaxy, but it doesn't feel like that big of a deal at all, does it? We're told that there's going to be this epic conquest, that the Kelvins, these gigantic multi-tentacled beings, are going to come in force and subjugate all the species of the Milky Way and take over, but all we see are a handful of normal-looking people in jumpsuits with buttons on their belts. I'm sorry, but I don't feel that intimidated. Drilling a bit deeper into that lack of stakes problem, maybe part of the issue is the time frame. Even if the bad guys achieve total victory over the heroes, it's still going to be at least 600 years before this conquering invasion arrives. 300 years to reach Andromeda, then another 300 for the Kelvins to return in force. Normally, I appreciate it when Star Trek nods in the direction of scientific accuracy, and the distances involved in intergalactic travel are unimaginably vast, but in this case, a bit more urgency would have helped. Kirk tells Rojan that traveling to Andromeda at maximum speed would take the Enterprise thousands of years, and Rojan promises to cut that down to 300 years with some engine modifications. Why not just go all the way and have Rojan say they can fix it so the Enterprise reaches Andromeda in a few days? Is that any more ridiculous? It would necessitate other changes in the characterization of the Kelvins, but it might be worth it to make the threat our heroes are fighting against more immediate. The way it's laid out in the episode, Kirk and company have literally the rest of their lives to figure out a way to stop Rojan and his crew. What's the hurry? Another factor holding the episode back is the fact that Rojan and the other villains don't have much to offer by way of personality. This is by design. The Kelvins are supposed to be disciplined and unemotional, and that plays into the plot eventually as Kirk and the others distract them with sensation and emotion, and that's all well and good, except it's not that interesting to watch. Rojan is a stiff, Kalinda acts like an android most of the time, and Haynar looks like he should be a bossy little twerp, but he's not. Hell, our two red shirts show more individuality than any of the Kelvins, even after they're turned into styrofoam blocks. At least they have dimension. The Kelvins aren't just bland and non-threatening, they're easily defeated as well. Despite the challenge posed by their freeze tag belts and the dreaded styrofoaming ray, the Kelvins fold under light pressure from Kirk, Spock, McCoy, and Scotty. Other than their first attempt to escape from the cave, which results in them immediately getting recaptured and ends in the brutal execution of the styrofoam block that used to be the cute lady redshirt, everything the heroes do in opposition to the villains goes pretty much to plan. The only hiccup is when they discover they can't disrupt the signal from the main power source of the freeze tag belts, but that turns out to not be such a big deal. When they put their distract the Kelvins with sensations and emotions plot into action, it works exactly how they hope it will, and in no time at all, the bad guys have been convinced to surrender, and Captain Kirk is back in command of the Enterprise. The way it plays out on screen, it all seems really, really easy. And to top it all off, the episode ends with the ship turning around to go back the way they came, and we're even told they're going to drop the Kelvins off at the same planet where this whole adventure started, meaning that this episode, which is ostensibly about an unbelievable journey to another galaxy, literally goes nowhere. However, having said all that, there are some good bits here. Like I told you before, it's not a great episode, but it's not a bad episode either. For whatever reason, the Kelvin's gimmick of turning people into styrofoam blocks is an image from classic Star Trek that has stuck. A lot of people, Trekkies and non-Trekkies, remember that. Even if they don't remember anything else about this episode, it's become one of those countless odd little details that define Star Trek in all its pulpy pop sci-fi weirdness in the minds of the general audience. There are also some very amusing moments, especially in the latter portion of the episode when the good guys are trying to distract the bad guys. Scotty's drinking session with Tomar is another bit that people remember even if they forget the rest of the episode, and rightly so. It's a well-structured bit that builds over multiple scenes, Scotty getting drunker and lower on booze, while Tomar keeps asking for more until finally that dusty old bottle of scotch does the trick. James Doohan turns in some of his best comedic work as Scotty in these scenes. I love the way he briefly breaks down in tears as he tells Tomar that all he has left is a very, very, very old bottle of scotch whiskey. It kills me every time. And of course, there's also that bit from a little earlier where Scotty offers Tomar a pour of something new. Tomar asks what it is, and the best description a very drunk Scotty can come up with is, "It's green," a moment the TNG episode Relics riffs on when Data pours Scotty a drink of something green in 10 Forward. Beyond Scotty's heroic drinking performance, there are other funny interactions between our main characters. After putting their plan into motion, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy meet up in the mess hall, and Kirk says, "I haven't seen Scotty in hours." Then Kalinda walks in, wanting some private time with Kirk, and McCoy is so interested in what's going on between them that Spock has to give him a little swat on the arm to draw his attention and get them out of the room. Later, when Spock and McCoy return to find Kirk fighting with Rojan, Kirk turns to his friends and says, "I'm stimulating him." By Any Other Name has one of the most impressive written by credits in the entire series. Teleplay by D.C. Fontana and Jerome Bixby, story by Jerome Bixby. Dorothy D.C. Fontana was arguably the most important writer who ever worked on Star Trek, or at least the most important writer who ever worked on Star Trek who wasn't named Gene. She wrote or rewrote some of the best episodes of the series and worked as a story editor during the show's first and second seasons, putting her creative stamp on the series even in episodes that didn't carry a credit with her name on it. Jerome Bixby was a brilliant sci-fi writer who wrote other Star Trek episodes, including Mirror Mirror and Requiem for Methuselah, which I reviewed not too long ago in the previous batch. The episode was directed by Mark Daniels, who was tied with the great Joseph Pevney for directing the most episodes of Star Trek TOS. There's a reason he was so prolific, and that reason is he's good. Daniels directed some of the best episodes Star Trek ever produced, including the aforementioned Mirror Mirror and other series highlights like The Man Trap, Space Seed, and The Doomsday Machine. With talents of that caliber working on it, you'd think this episode would be better. Why isn't it? I don't know. I prefer to look at it another way. Think of how much worse it would have been without D.C. Fontana and Jerome Bixby writing it, and Mark Daniels directing it. Bixby's original script was apparently far more serious than this. Fontana rewrote it to inject some levity, which was often her assignment and which she was very good at. And Daniels handles the action well, giving the comedy room to play and finding shots that at least attempt to inject some drama and gravity into the situation, like this shot of Kirk staring down at the styrofoam block that used to be Chekhov after most of the crew has been neutralized by the Kelvins. The thing about this episode is, yes, it could have been a lot better, but it also could have been a hell of a lot worse. And as I was watching it this morning for this review, I found myself wishing that it had been one of those. Either a lot better or a lot worse. Then writing a review would have been easier because there would be more to talk about, more good stuff to praise, or more failures and miscalculations to point at and shake my head. As it is, by any other name, doesn't stand out for its excellence or its awfulness, nor does it set itself apart from the many episodes of Star Trek that are just kind of there, perfectly pleasant to watch, with their occasional standout moments that we might remember later on. After you watch it, this one fades back in with the rest, indistinguishable, until it could just as easily have been any other episode. At least it's got the right title. Those are my thoughts on By Any Other Name. What do you think of this episode? Please share your thoughts with me in the comments. If you'd like to support this channel, and I sure wish you would, if you can afford it, you can do so by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Steve Shives, becoming a channel member by clicking the join button, or by making a one-time gift by clicking the thanks button, or via PayPal or Venmo. Links are in the description. Please join me next time as this Hijacked batch continues. The next episode I'll be reviewing is one from Season 6 of Star Trek The Next Generation, an episode titled Starship Mine. See you next time for that. Thanks for watching, and take care, everybody.